Who-dats. Welcome to the podcast you've been waiting for. Great perspective and exclusive interviews.
It's a hard job for those guys because it's happening fast.
The kind of Saints insight and fun commentary you won't get anywhere else.
We've got plenty of technology to speed things up.
It's time to kick off your Been There, Done That Saints podcast, where we hand it off to our host, Mike Nabors, and Super Bowl winning linebacker, Scott Shanle.
Proud of these guys.
I'm ready to do it. You know, we had the great year. I'm tired of talking about the great year. I'm ready to move on. We won the national championship. It was great. We celebrated for a week. And then after that week, I was ready to move on.
Joe Burrow at the NFL Combine saying, you know what? That last year at LSU was great, but now I'm ready to make some big money in the pros and impress the pro scouts. Welcome to your Been There, Done That podcast. I am Mike Nabors. I'm going to bring in my partners, producer Justin Thomas, and Scott Shanle, my co-host as well. We're going to hear a lot from Joe Burrow. We're going to talk about Drew Brees coming back. We have an exclusive interview with Wil Lutz, and of course, we have more likely. But let's talk Combine off the bat. We're going to get to Joe Burrow. I love the attitude, Shanle. You know, we've documented this in this podcast, but you've known Joe Burrow for a long time. I love everything about this guy. I love the way he handles himself. I love the way that he always kind of enjoys the moment, but moves on. And this was just another example of that this week in Indianapolis.
Yeah, if there's one player who was going to benefit from going to the Combine and just being around the teams, it was going to be Joe Burrow. And obviously he's projected to be the number one pick, so how much more can you benefit from that point of view? But he conducts himself well in front of the cameras. He's going to sit down with probably almost every NFL team, even though they don't have a chance to get him. And he's going to blow them away with he's a football guy. It's what he loves. I mean, we've heard countless stories this year how he would turn his phone off or he lost his phone. He told his mom, don't even get me another one. I'm getting ready for a game this week. So every team is going to fall in love with Joe Burrow, the football player, and they're going to fall in love with Joe Burrow, the person, because they know they're going to get somebody who loves the game of football.
Justin Thomas, our esteemed producer, you helped me pull down the Joe Burrow sound from the Combine. He was pretty candid about playing in Cincinnati potentially and about, playing, being the number one overall pick, wasn't he?
Yeah, and like Scott said, I love him. I think he's going to be great. I love, like you said, Mike, the way he's handled kind of the media scrutiny about his hand size. I thought that was hilarious. I'm excited to see where he lands and how well he's going to do.
I'm glad they don't measure, to me, Shanle, hand size, all this stuff. You went through the NFL Combine process. We're going to get to Joe Burrow, okay? We're going to get to him and all that in a second. But has this become more and more of a joke every year, the Combine? Is it getting – it seems like the hype gets more and more intense, but it kind of gets exposed too to some degree.
Well, it's extremely overrated, and there's the reason for the hype. The reason it continues to grow every year is because there's a lot more coverage of it. When you put it on TV for hours upon hours during the day, you can't call it what it is, and it's the underwear Olympics, and it doesn't really correlate to much. So who's going to tune in if you downplay it? So I've always been frustrated by the fact that we all say recruiting in college and scouting in the NFL is an inexact science, but we don't do anything to make it any better. And to me, the NFL Combine, you get what you deserve when you continually conduct it the way it is. You give all the players the exact drills to prepare for 2 months in advance. Of course, they should look good in the drills. It's hard to tell who can do what. I think the players should have to show up, do drills that they have no idea what they're going to do. You can get an idea of the instincts that a guy has, the natural ability. And I can't believe at this point we haven't asked guys to run a 40 in pads, do their drills in pads, catch balls in pads. There's receivers who can run a 4.3 that can't catch a ball with a helmet on consistently. So there's just a lot better ways to evaluate players than what the Combine does.
Do we really need to have a lot of these quarterbacks run the 40 too? I mean, do we need to have Joe Burrow run the 40? Is that really important?
No, I would say no, but I think this day and age, as much RPO, as much as the quarterback keeps the ball, it's nice to see. I mean, Dwayne Haskins running a 5 flat last year was kind of eye-opening to me. You better throw the ball really well if you can't run in the 4s. You better be Peyton Manning-esque or somebody like that if you're going to go in the top 10 as a quarterback. So I think there's a little bit that you can tell from a 40-yard dash. And I actually like to see the big guys running. When you see a lineman running in the 4.8s or 4.9s, D linemen run 4.7s, those guys usually end up being pretty decent players. Teron Armstead, I think, still has the record for the 40-yard dash for an O lineman, and he's turned out to be a pretty good player.
Yeah, we had him on the podcast last year, and I think he still takes obviously great pride in that. And he's turned out to be a great pro and a great pickup for the New Orleans Saints. Like I said, we'll get to Joe Burrow in a second. We're going to talk Drew Brees and Teddy Bridgewater and Taysom Hill's future. We're going to have an exclusive with Wil Lutz as well, the Saints kicker. Shanle, we've been on over a year now. This is our 45th podcast, and we appreciate all your support, Saints fans and football fans. But we talked about the Combine a year ago, but you were at the NFL Combine, and I know it's changed quite a bit. How did you feel going into that? Was it nervousness? Was it excitement? I'm sure it was a little bit of both.
A little bit of both. It was something that was exciting because you got that call to go, and not everybody does. There's a lot of good players that don't get to go do it, but the experience is really not that fun. You walk around in tights. They measure body fat all the time. They measure your wrist size, your hand size that we heard with Joe Burrow. They measure your knee. I mean, every single thing you can measure, and that was the point where I realized you are a commodity. I mean, it's so devalues your worth as a human that I can't even describe. It's something I would never want to do again. And I actually feel sorry for what the guys are going through up there or getting ready to go through. It's a great opportunity to impress teams and to get drafted higher, and that's the ultimate dream. But it makes you realize quickly it's a business and you are a commodity now.
Did you have any feel for your draft status when you left Indianapolis out of Nebraska?
Absolutely not. Not
Really?
one bit. I think when you stand in a group of 20 linebackers or whatever position you do, and you do maybe the agility drill better than some, but you run a little bit slower 40 than some others, there's so many variables that you just don't know what teams put in and put out as far as they're evaluating you. And then on top of it, there's a lot of great players that didn't even get invited to the Combine that you didn't get to compare yourself to that get drafted ahead of you during the NFL draft. So you really have no idea unless you're a first or second round pick and you're just trying to move up and down the charts as far as maybe sneaking into the late first round. It's hard to really know where you are being evaluated after leaving the Combine.
All right, give me a brush with greatness Combine story, whether it was the interaction with the head coach or maybe you were in line with the guy who turned out to be a future Hall of Famer in your draft class. Was there, looking back at the Combine, something you'll tell your grandkids one day, this guy talked to me, I was working out with this guy? Does any coach or player pop out? And I'm putting you on the spot here, I realize that.
Not really. I said that my NFL Combine experience was not fun, and I chose to not really remember it because it's something I never want to go through again. But we had a lot of really great players in the 2003 draft class. Carson Palmer, I believe, was the number 1 overall pick my year, but Terrell Suggs was a guy who I believe ran a slow 40, and they thought he was sliding down the draft boards. We all know what he turned out to be as a player. So there's a lot of players I remember in my draft class that didn't go up to Indy and tear up the Combine that had really great careers. But on the flip side of that, I also remember a lot of guys who were workout warriors, guys who got drafted way ahead of me. I was a 7th round pick. And I thought, well, he ran a faster 40 or he had a higher vertical jump. And these guys didn't play 1, 2, maybe even 3 years in the NFL. So I'll never forget seeing those guys tear up the Combine and not be worth a damn in the NFL playing football. And that's maybe why I have some hate for the NFL Combine.
And you're a nice guy, too. So that says a lot about the Combine. All right, let's talk about Joe Burrow. I love the story that you gave our last podcast. You played in Nebraska. You played with Joe Burrow's brother. You've known the family for years. You told us the story last time about, I guess, some bowl game or it was some college game, and little Joe Burrow was in the arcade, and he wouldn't leave till he got the high score. Maybe while I'm asking you other questions, you can think of another. I'm going to ask you another maybe funny Joe Burrow story growing up because you've known him for a long, long time. But Justin mentioned his hands, 9-inch hands, and immediately this shows the confidence of Joe Burrow. He tweets out, I may consider retirement. Please keep me in your thoughts. You know what? If I'm a head coach, I love that, Shanle. I love that he has a sense of humor. And more importantly than that, I love his confidence.
Yeah, he doesn't lack confidence. You could see it grow. The 2 years he was at LSU, the more he played, the better he got. And he believes in himself, and he believes he is the best player in the NFL draft. But I'll tell you, any competitor, any guy who every single day tries to become a better person, you use things like this as fuel to the fire. And I'm sure it drove him crazy when they measured his hands and it was 9-inch hands, and then social media blew up and it's all they were talking about all over the major networks. I'm sure it drove him crazy as a competitor to think, after everything I've done, maybe the greatest college football year in college football history, and now people are saying maybe I shouldn't go number 1 overall because of my hand size. I'm sure that drove him crazy as a competitor, just like it would anybody.
Kind of reminds you of the guy who plays quarterback for the Saints. I saw a Dan Patrick show in the Super Bowl a couple years ago where Patrick had a good idea. He gave each guest a kind of a rundown of what the so-called critics said were their flaws during the NFL draft. And Brees was the first guy, and a lot of guys had to read this on the air. Brees was the first guy, after he read it and after the interview was over, he said, "Can I keep this?" And he put it in his locker. And you know what? I see Joe Burrow being that kind of guy. Maybe not as, vocal about stuff like that. But let's talk about Drew Brees before we get to Joe Burrow. I wasn't going to be surprised either way. I had a talk with him at the Pro Bowl. We played in this podcast, if you want to go back a couple episodes, where he talked about his passion for doing television. We may never know this, Shanle, but he could have been offered something, or he could have been waiting for an offer that didn't come around because maybe Tony Romo's re-upping, maybe Monday Night Football on ESPN, and that they're going to bring back Booger. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but I kind of had a feeling at the Pro Bowl that Brees may have one foot out of the pool and maybe leaning towards retirement a little bit. But I also think the biggest reason he's coming back is because of that window of opportunity. We saw it during the 3 straight 7-9 seasons. He thought about, and he's even said this, he thought about if the team didn't change, if the team didn't get better, he would retire. And that was before the 2017 draft class. The big reason he came back is, A, I think he knows he can still play, and he showed it late in the year. But B, this team can still win. And Shanle, don't you think that's the bottom line?
Yes, you think you said it there. The bottom line is the nucleus of this team has one more run in them. And I don't know what they're going to be like after this year. I believe the roster is going to change dramatically after this year because you can't pay everybody. And you reap the benefits for about 4 years of drafting really well, but then ultimately you need to pay players. Some of those guys are going to go to free agency and strike it big. So I think this team as constructed is pretty much going to be back. You have all the main players, all the main stars. You're going to have to replace a few guys here and there, maybe add some more depth to your team. But I think when Drew sat down at the end of the season and thought, if I walked away from this team and this team went on to win the Super Bowl, how would I feel about that? Because this team has the talent. They have the ability. They've come up short the last 3 years through their own doing, through a referee's doing for one other year. But this team has one more run in them. And I think, to me, it's a shame. This team had the ability to win, I think, 2 Super Bowls. They're almost like the Seattle Seahawks were in 2013, where everybody thought the Seahawks were going to go rattle off 3 or 4 Super Bowls. Well, the window of opportunity in the NFL, your dynasty now is 3 to 4 years. And this team is in their 4th year before they have to reconstruct this team. So I believe ultimately, when it was all said and done, that was the main reason, is he thinks this team can win the Super Bowl.
And I know last podcast I pestered you about Taysom Hill because I want to see Taysom Hill as a starter. You have your doubts, but you're not alone. A lot of people have their doubts about him being a starter. But I do believe Taysom Hill is going to be back. And if Taysom Hill's back, I think they need to bring Chase Daniel back, or some facsimile of a Chase Daniel, one of the McCown brothers, a veteran, because Taysom Hill can't be the backup, Shanle. He won't be the Swiss Army knife if he's the backup. They're going to have to change the offense. It's not feasible. Don't you think they're going to have to bring in a veteran if Taysom comes back?
Absolutely. Yeah, because Taysom Hill can't be your backup quarterback and continue to play in the role he's been playing, because if he gets injured, now you have Drew Brees, over 40 years old, who at any time could get any type of injury. So Taysom Hill has always benefited from that Teddy Bridgewater buffer in between him and Drew, because now he can go out there and be the football player he is, the Swiss Army knife that he excels so well at. So I agree. I think this Saints team is going to have to go out there, whether it's Chase Daniel, who's knows the system, they're going to go out there and find some veteran quarterback on the trash heap, Mariota, somebody like that. And I think if I'm Marcus Mariota or some player like that who's a veteran player who a team has given up on, I would love to go learn under Drew Brees for a year, see what Sean Payton's offense is like, and maybe resurrect your career.
That's a good call, Marcus Mariota. We'll see what happens there. And anybody can pull me off the trash heap if they want to pay me a couple million a year, too. Pull me off the trash heap any day of the week. Let's go talk about Joe Burrow again. I gave you some time to think about this, but you played with Joe Burrow's brother. I mean, is it kind of surreal watching all this? I mean, I don't think I've asked you about him in that way. A year ago, he was a guy that, I hope he's a nice little player next year. He'll be a serviceable guy for LSU. He'll be picked in maybe the 3rd round if he has a decent year. And, you've seen the kind of year he's had. Looks like he's going to be the number 1 overall pick. Is it kind of crazy watching this?
It is. And I'll tell you, it's been kind of awkward for me, because I remember 6 years ago, Jamie Burrows, Joe's brother, would always send me videos of Joe playing in high school, and he just bragged about him all the time, called him Super Burrow, and he got all the genetics in our family and this and that.
Really?
Yeah, and so he saw it in high school. He was Ohio Player of the Year, and I thought he was a great player, and then Nebraska didn't offer him, and he went to Ohio State, and I thought, geez, Ohio State recruits the top quarterbacks every year. It might be tough for Joe to play there, and ultimately he had to transfer and transferred into a good situation at LSU with a lot of good athletes around him, but really didn't tear it up in his first year playing. And so his brother Jamie would ask me after games what I thought he looked like, and then after the end of the year, he put me on the spot and say, if Joe left right now, where do you think he'd get drafted? And I said, Jamie's probably a 6th, 7th, or undrafted pick. And he would get mad at me because because that's the brother. And I'm like, Jamie, you want me to be honest with you? I'm looking at it from a GM perspective. And to look back at it, McShay and Kuiper and all those guys had him as an undrafted or late round pick. So going into this year, nobody saw the acceleration. I mean, he was 7th round pick to begin the year, and now he's going to be the number 1 overall pick. Nobody's seen an extent like that to the top of the draft boards ever, I don't think, in any player. So what he's done, and even this year, when he started off the year, I would text his brother and say, Joe's release is looking quicker. He looks like he has better footwork in the pocket. And he would text me back and say, he's always had a good quick release. He's always had good footwork in the pocket. So he gets real defensive because he would look at it through his brother's lenses. But he improved so much as a player and just all those little things that can help him be a great quarterback in the NFL.
It seems like, he's a little brother, but they almost treat him like a son because there's the age difference there, and it seems they're very protective of him. You don't always see that. Sometimes the little brother gets picked on. There seems to be a difference in this relationship. Am I right?
Yeah, there's a big difference because of the age gap. His 2 older brothers were really out of the house when Joe was really little. They were both in college when he was 5, 6, 7. So he really grew up as almost like an only child situation. And I think Joe's sibling was football, throwing the football around, going outside and finding things to do. And it always revolved around football. But yeah, there was a difference because of the age gap where his brothers really weren't in the home to do that beating up on him like normal brothers would.
I always picture that Sports Center ad with, Peyton and Eli kicking each other in the hallway and Archie looking at him when you picture the little brother stereotype. What was I don't know how well you knew Joe. Obviously, you knew Jamie and you knew the family well. But, has he always been confident? I mean, do you know him that well where you knew his personality maybe at a young age?
Well, I saw a little bit of his personality just being around him when I was at Nebraska. And he was a very focused, very quiet kid. But a lot of times when people are quiet, they're keeping to themselves, they're very driven. And that was Joe, and you still see it in him today. He's been a much more verbal, as his confidence has grown, as he's shown the world what type of player he is. He's become more vocal and things like that. So that's been fun to see, letting more of his personality out. But knowing his family, the way they competed, they loved the game, they loved to try to get better every single day. His dad was one of the best football coaches I've ever seen. So I knew Joe was getting that at home as well. Just the love of the game and the love to compete, I think is a very rare quality. And I talk about all the time that Drew Brees is the most competitive person I've been around. And you need that. And we talked about the combine. Teams need to find out how much these guys love competition. I talk to the guys I train about that all the time. You need to make sure you love competition because it doesn't matter what those checks look like because you're going to get paid whether you win or lose. If you don't love competition, you're going to be miserable because this game is as competitive a game as there is on the planet. And I think that's what teams have to find out about players. Do you love competition? And there's no doubt Joe Burrow loves competition.
Well, he's going to get a lot of competition as the potential starting quarterback for the Cincinnati Bengals. There was a lot of talk going in if he really wanted to go to Cincinnati, and he addressed that in Indianapolis at the Combine. Here's what he had to say.
I'm not going to not play. I'm a ball player. Whoever picks me, I'm going to go show up. 2 hours, 15 minutes from my house. I could go home for dinner if I wanted to. Not a lot of pro athletes could get to do that.
Shanle, he knew the exact time, 2 hours and 15 minutes. That's pretty impressive. And you know what? He was asked at the press conference about Eli Manning and leverage and all of that. And he said, well, he was quoted, his leverage was, well, I have the leverage to throw or not to throw at the Combine. So that interview was taken out of context. You know the family, and I'm not taking anything away from the Manning family. If I'm a father, I'm going to protect my son. I want him to be in a good situation. But it seems like the Eli Manning San Diego Chargers, then San Diego Chargers situation compared to the Joe Burrow Cincinnati situation is a little different.
Yeah, I think It is and it isn't. The Burrow family I know isn't the type of family that likes to throw their weight around and take advantage of situations. The way they're looking at it and the way they've probably talked about it is, if you're the player you think you are and we all believe you are, it doesn't matter what team you go to. You can turn them into a winner. And I do believe that. And I also think there's a difference, because in the Manning family, you had Archie who played in the NFL, you had Peyton who played in the NFL, and then Eli came along. So they understood what a good organization looked like. They understood what a functional organization looked like. So Archie did his best to try to put Eli into one of those type of organizations. The Burrow family doesn't have as much experience with the NFL, with front offices, with owners, what good ownership looks like. And, my 2 cents on it is I don't think they would hold out from playing for Cincinnati, but I would love to see Joe play for any other team but Cincinnati. I think they're the worst run team in the NFL. Their owner counts pennies. I've heard of players having to pay for extra Gatorades that they take home from the facility.
Really?
It is not a very good, it is a horribly run organization, to be honest. And as talented as Joe is, you still need players put around you. You need a functional organization that supports every single aspect of winning football. And I don't think Cincinnati is that.
Interesting stuff. Paying for Gatorade, that's brutal. It sounds like Hugh Culverhouse in the Bucks back in the day. You have some of these owners, it's unreal. Speaking of Cincinnati, along the same lines, Joe Burrow was asked about the importance of being the number one pick, because he's embraced being a Heisman Trophy winner, but he's always been a team guy. Now he has a chance to really be all about him in this process. Does he? How important is it for him to be the number one overall pick?
Oh, I think it's very important. Every player dreams of playing in the NFL, but how many people can say they were the number one overall pick in the NFL draft, that the NFL, the elite of the elite, said you were the best player of that year coming out, and everybody wants you of all 32 teams? I think being the number one pick is a huge deal, but also because your signing bonus is going to be the highest because it's slotted based on where you draft. But I also think as a player coming out, your success in the NFL is more dictated on going to the right situation, to the right team, to the right fit. And you saw that with Joe at LSU. He really blossomed when he played for an offensive coordinator who knew what his strengths were, and he played for a good program in LSU. So there's a lot of things that you always want to be the number one pick. You always want to go as high as you can. But when your career's done and over with, you look back and say, man, I was in a great situation. I was in a great organization that matched up perfectly. Or you say, I wasn't. So you have to look at it from that lens, and you really don't ever get to look at it until you retire.
Well, Joe Burrow well. Here's what he had to say about potentially being number one overall.
Of course I want to be the first pick. That's every kid's dream. I've worked really, really hard for this opportunity, and I'm blessed to be in this position, and a lot of people helped me get here. So I'm just really excited to be in this place.
All right, Joe Burrow talking about Cincinnati, talking about being the number one overall pick. So it'll be an interesting run for him. Before we get to more likely, let's talk a little more Saints. I had a chance at the Pro Bowl to catch up to a lot of guys, and let's bring in somebody who's been really good since he came on the roster a few years back, and that's kicker Wil Lutz. He had that hyped up tryout with Sean Payton, who said it was the best workout he's ever seen from a kicker. No pressure there, and he's really delivered since then. I had a chance to talk to him about a few things, and he maybe doesn't have the strongest leg of any kicker in the NFL, but Sean Payton always talks about his mental game. We talked about that after his workout at the Pro Bowl recently.
All the kickers in the NFL have strong legs. You're very talented. But Sean Payton always points to your mental game, what you have between the ears. Do you feel like that's what really has gotten you this far to a large degree?
Yeah, I think the mental game, especially as a specialist, in every position it's that way, but especially as a specialist, the mental game is the biggest part, Obviously, we missed a few kicks this year that you don't want to miss, but you got to bounce back and hit an even bigger kick coming up. And I think you saw that in the Texans game. We missed a kick early, and we had to hit a big kick. Unfortunately, in the Vikings game, we missed a kick early, but we had to hit a big kick, to go to overtime. And I think that's kind of the name of the game. You got to be able to move on from things. And I really pride myself in my mental game, and that's kind of my strength, in my opinion.
Because you've made so many kicks, when you have the misses, does that help, just knowing you've had great success?
No, nothing helps the misses. Misses suck, but yeah. I think that I've been able to prove to myself that I can make kicks. I'm where I'm supposed to be, and I think just learning through experience makes you realize, you're where you belong, and I think that's the biggest thing for me.
I know you linebackers, you guys don't love kickers. You don't love punters, but you respect them when they perform. And you got to respect Shanle, the fact that he owned up to missing that kick against Minnesota, and he says he'll never forget it. You don't forget the misses. You got to like that.
Yeah, I think it's hard not to like Wil Lutz. To me, he's been one of the best kickers in the NFL the last couple of years, finally starting to get the respect individually that he's earned. But I think the thing that separates him from a lot of kickers is his mental makeup. Is he doesn't let those one miss become 3, 4, 5 in a row, and you have a great kicker when you're shocked when he misses, and that's Wil Lutz. Every time he trots out there, you just automatically assume he's going to make it, but he is human, and those things happen. And I think, like I said, the thing I respect most about Wil is his mental toughness. How those one miss don't become 2, 3, or 4 in a row, and that's usually what gets guys cut. Is when those demons start to get in their head.
Yeah, he should have been a Pro Bowler 2 years in a row. 32 of 36 for field goals, 48 of 49 extra points, only one extra point miss, and only 4 missed field goals in the 2019 season. Before we get to our final segment, one more thing from Wil Lutz. He talks about the team coming back, and this is before he knew that Drew Brees was coming back, and maybe he did know, and Brees told everybody. But here's next year's Saints take from Wil Lutz.
No team is the same year after year. You guys are going to have some changes, but it seems like the core is intact. Looks like Drew's going to come back. This team has to feel good about themselves heading into next season.
Yeah, the hard part of this league is, you never know who's going to be here the next year. And, you get so tight with all these guys. So when the season ends, that's really the hardest part. It's not the wins and the losses. It's that camaraderie in the league that you don't want to lose. So, obviously I hope we have all 53 guys back, but, that's not how it works. And, whatever happens next year, I think we'll have just as good as locker room as ever.
I think the strength of the Saints team, and we've talked about it in past podcasts, Shanle, you're probably going to lose Von Bell, but you have Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. You prepare for a loss of Von Bell. A lot of teams don't, like Cincinnati, who we just talked about. A lot of these teams, Tampa Bay has been like this for years. They just go through free agents and they lose them, and they don't have a plan B. It seems like the Saints, really since Jeff Ireland has come on board, they have more of a plan B than ever.
Yeah, and that's why you have to draft well. That's the name of the game. You have to have young, talented players who aren't taking up a bunch of your salary cap, be able to fill in when guys get hurt, but more importantly, fill in and become that next stepping stone to your franchise. And we saw it with the Saints when they started drafting well and building depth to their team. You win more games, and that goes into being a functional organization. Have a good scouting department, a good general manager. A lot of teams don't have that, and I think we can all agree before Coach Payton got to the Saints were probably listed as not a functional organization. I give a lot of credit to Mr. Benson, the way he changed his outlook on how he conducted business. When we first got there, we weren't staying in the best hotels. We didn't have the best of everything, the pregame meals. But when you start to win, and you can see as an owner, if I continue to put money back into this product, it's going to snowball into some success. And I think I give Coach Payton a lot of credit for kind of convincing Mr. Benson that these were the things you need to be a functional organization. And that was the turnaround in the New Orleans Saints. And there's no doubt that you would list the Saints as a functional organization now, along with probably 7 or 8 hand-picked teams in the NFL.
But you never had to pay for Gatorade as a member of the Saints, did you?
No, never had to pay for Gatorade as the Saints. There might not be as many Gatorades in there in 2006 as there were in 2012 after you won a Super Bowl. But, I heard stories from Arizona Cardinals players when I played that they would charge them for getting extra shorts or extra undershirts and things like that. So there are some organizations out there. Don't make no mistake about it. These guys have a lot of money. They're billionaires, but they're counting pennies. And just because they have a lot of money doesn't mean they're looking to waste any of it. But the ownership, those teams usually struggle because guys as free agents, like we talked about before, they don't want to go play in organizations like that. So you want to be known as a functional organization if you want to accumulate talent in free agency.
This is what I love about this podcast is I never thought going in we'd be talking about paying for Gatorade as a professional football player. But that's the way we roll here, man. We don't have really a big pre-show meeting. We just kind of roll with the great Joe Burrow stories. But we're not done yet. Justin, you know what time it is. More likely time. We talked Drew Brees. We talked Taysom Hill. We haven't talked Teddy Bridgewater. And Teddy Bridgewater's not going to be New Orleans Saint next year. They can't afford him. But more likely, and Justin gets to go first. I know he loves this, than Shanle. Teddy Bridgewater, to me, an interesting place for him, in my opinion, are the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think they have an emerging defense. They got a ton of weapons. They have, you could say they have more offensive weapons than the Saints do. I mean, they have better wide receivers. I think they're going to bolster their running game a little bit. More likely, who would you take if you ran the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? Teddy Bridgewater or Jameis Winston?
I had a feeling as you started the question that you were going to put Teddy in Tampa. I would definitely.
It's always fun when you throw Jameis Winston in any question.
Well, this is true too. I would definitely choose Teddy. I mean, Jameis obviously is gifted, super talented. I mean, he showed that last year. But his problem is the turnovers. And I remember when Bruce Arians was getting there, everyone thought the QB whisperer was going to be able to fix those issues with Jameis, minimize the turnovers, and, take the things that Jameis was good at and build on that. And instead, he had the worst season ever probably for a QB, broke the record for interception. So I think Teddy showed that he can hold on the ball. He's not going to turn it over often. Plus, he's already gifted and talented. I would love to see what someone like Bruce Arians could do with Teddy and maybe even take him to the next step that a lot of people thought that he would be able to do with Jameis.
If I would have asked Justin that question a year ago, Shanle, he wouldn't have given us an answer like that. He's unbelievably talented as a producer and an editor and all this stuff, but he's become quite an on-air personality in this past year. Shanle, you always say this about the Bucs, about how they have all these shiny toys. And Jameis Winston's kind of that shiny toy, but when you put him out there, it's like the land of misfit toys sometimes. But if you were the GM of the Bucs, who would be your quarterback?
I agree. I think you have to go with Teddy Bridgewater. You've seen what you've seen in Jameis Winston. It's hard for organizations to give up on number one overall picks, especially if he goes somewhere else after his LASIK surgery and tears it up. He got his eyes fixed, but can you really give him $30 million based on getting LASIK surgery? I don't think so. So you go with Bridgewater. You put your money into building your defense, running the ball more. But I just think Jameis is what he is. If you made me compare the two, I think Jameis Winston is a better quarterback than Teddy Bridgewater. But it's the turning the ball over. You can't win games when you continue to shoot yourself in the foot. And Jameis just hasn't shown that he's ever going to improve that.
Yeah, Bruce Arians, made all kinds of excuses for Jameis Winston the whole year. All the interceptions weren't his fault. But down the stretch, the tone really changed because he never got better. I mean, he would always put up the big numbers, but he made the crucial mistakes, ending with the pick six to end the Bucs season. I don't know why. My gut kind of tells me they're going to stay with Winston. But if I'm in charge, I go Teddy Bridgewater because all the things that I mentioned earlier, their defense, they're going to bring back some guys. Shaq Barrett had a huge year. Jason Pierre-Paul. They have some young guys in that secondary that are going to get better. I think the linebackers are improving. But the offense, if you get a guy who's steady and doesn't make the big mistake, I think the Bucs could be really good. We'll see if they'll pull the trigger on that. All right, more likely question number 2. We stick with quarterbacks, and we come back to Joe Burrow. And here's what I love about more likely. I can do hypotheticals. If my man Tua was healthy, didn't have the injuries this year, who would you draft, Justin, more likely? Joe Burrow, given the year he had, let's just say Tua didn't get hurt but narrowly lost to Joe Burrow and still was, behind Joe Burrow and everything, all the postseason awards, but was healthy. Who would you take, a healthy Tua or a successful Joe Burrow?
This is tough. Part of my answer is due to the fact that I haven't watched Tua play nearly as much as I've watched Joe Burrow. I think I would go on the fact that Joe seems to have shown that he can run an NFL-style offense especially well this past season. He was phenomenal. I think Tua's probably maybe the more athletically talented, but I think Joe is maybe more mentally ready in terms of the game and how it plays. So from that aspect, I think maybe Joe would jump off. Even if Tua was healthy, Joe would probably be able to step in and play and have more immediate success than maybe Tua would.
What do you think, Shanle? Joe Burrow or a healthy Tua?
This is a tough one because there's so many things about Joe that I love. The mental makeup, I think he's going to be a good pro because the way he loves the game, the improvement that he showed from 2 years ago to last year. He's always going to grind. He's going to love sitting in the film room. Maybe Tua is the same way. I don't know him personally. But I think Tua is the more naturally gifted player, just in the fact of he's too injury prone. So that's another reason I wouldn't take Tua over Joe. But when you talk about just natural throwing motion, Tua has it over Joe. Joe, maybe the arm strength isn't as good, but you watch Tua throw a deep ball. You watch how fast the ball comes out. It's a flick of a wrist, how tight the ball spins. He is a more naturally gifted passer of the football.
That was very objective. You praised Joe Burrow. You know the family, but when I place it to you like that, that's why you know what you're going to get from Scott Shanle, ladies and gentlemen. He's not going to be partisan. He's going to be very objective all the time. Do you buy into this that the Tua is kind of like that left-handed Drew Brees? The accuracy with Tua, if he can stay healthy, that's the big draw. Not to say that Joe Burrow is not accurate, but Tua has that next level accuracy to him, it seems like.
Yeah, and a lot of it is due to you just watch a guy throw the ball, and do they have the flick of the wrist? When he throws it, it comes out really quick and it gets there really fast. But to me, his touch on his deep passes, and you see his receivers who are all really fast, they just run underneath those deep balls. And I think you're going to get a team in the NFL who's going to air it out a lot with him because he has that natural touch on the deep ball. And then on those short and intermediate throws, the ball gets there in a hurry because he has such a quick release.
Interesting stuff. I don't know. There's something about this Joe Burrow. There's something about him. And I think we all agree we'd select him because Tua's had injury problems and he's proven that he can't stay healthy. But I'll be interested to see if Joe Burrow can make it work in the NFL. Just something about some of these quarterbacks, you can't pinpoint them at an NFL Combine, which leads me to the last more likely. A lot of people talk about the NFL Combine being lame. We've talked about it in this podcast, being overrated. I'm going to give you a list of overrated things, and you have to pick the most overrated thing on this list. And while you guys have been talking, of course, I make notes during this podcast. I'm going to give you a list, Justin. You pick the most overrated thing.
All right.
And we may throw this out in our Twitter poll this week, okay? Well, I'll narrow it down a little bit.
Right.
Starbucks, The Bachelor, the Cowboys, the Kardashians, fireworks, or the Combine. The Combine, fireworks, the Kardashians, the Cowboys, the Bachelor, or Starbucks. Out of all of those, what's the most overrated thing in America?
Can I go with all of them? Because they're all really overrated. I will say this. I mean, I think Starbucks is good. I don't think it's amazing, and I don't understand the hype, but it's not like it's horrible. But man, a lot of those things on your list are really not only overrated, but just downright kind of pathetic. I'm looking at The Bachelor and the Kardashians. Cowboys too, I guess. I don't know. That's a tough one. I
know my answer. I can't wait to say it, but you got to pick one.
Okay, I'll go with the Kardashians. They're overrated and also depressingly popular.
Should we make this our poll question, narrow it down and make it our poll question this week? I think we should. I know. I want to too. The Combine's looking better and better after this list, but the Combine will be on there. So check out our Twitter handle at, what is it again, Justin? Okay, at Dundad Podcast. We'll have that up this week. All right, Shanle. I never know with you sometimes. That's what makes this podcast fun. I'm going to give it to you again. You got the Combine, you got Starbucks, you got The Bachelor, you got the Cowboys, the Kardashians, or fireworks?
Well, I think there is a little bit of value to the Combine. It is overrated, but I'm going to go with the Cowboys. It drives me crazy. This team has not won anything since the mid-90s, but all we do, every time you turn TV on, they're talking about Jerry Jones. They're talking about Dak Prescott's contract now. They always find a story revolving around the Dallas Cowboys, and they haven't won anything. I mean, they talk about this team like they are the New England Patriots. We haven't seen them win anything meaningful it's going to be over 25 years, going on 30 years, and yet they take over the airwaves. We talk about it all the time. They're on the radio. Major news networks and sports networks, that's all they talk about is the Cowboys 24/7. I've about had it with how much Cowboy talk there is. Until they win something, until they actually do something, stop talking about them. Find something else to talk about in the sports world.
Wow. How about that, ladies and gentlemen? And Scott Shanle lives in Dallas, by the way, so it's more objectivity right there. You know, remember all the Tony Romo narratives over and over? Is this the year? Is this, I'd love to ask Roger Staubach. I wonder if he wouldn't talk about it publicly, but he won in Dallas. And Troy Aikman won in Dallas. And those guys have to be kind of shaking their heads too. I mean, especially a guy like Troy Aikman, Shanle, who played with Jimmy Johnson and saw that fall out and knew that, they could have won more if they would have kept him around. Those guys would be interesting to kind of pick their brains about this subject.
I think Troy's kind of been more outspoken about it recently and has not really said it in the same words that we're saying it, but he's messed around with the idea that, hey, until this team wins something, can we cool it on all the storylines and all the narratives? And he's been critical of Jerry Jones and the way Jerry does business. And I played for the Cowboys. I went from the Cowboys to the Saints. There's a big difference between organizations. And I call the Cowboys the country club Cowboys because Jerry gives them the best of everything. And you walk around and you all think you've earned something and you've never done anything because you have the star on your helmet. It's almost it's a blessing in disguise that I ended up getting to go to the Saints and seeing what that organization was like versus the Cowboys, because you lose reality when you play for Jerry and you have the best of the best, even if you don't win. And I think that's what happens to the players is they get soft because they don't know what reality is because they're talked about all the time like they're winning Super Bowls.
You know what? I'm going to table this discussion for the next podcast, but I want to ask your reaction when you had to go from the Cowboys to the Saints. But we'll table that'll be a tease for future podcasts. So I'm writing this down. I'm going to ask you about that. But C Cubed, the country club Cowboys. I love it. I'm going to break all these down. I'm not a coffee drinker. Starbucks, I could care less. I have 2 daughters, and I say, you know what, girls, you can be anything you want to be in life. Obviously, you can marry whoever you want, but please don't ever go on The Bachelor. Please don't. Never been a big Cowboys fan at all, but extremely overrated. The Kardashians, they would be second on this list. But to me, I cannot stand fireworks. All right? I really didn't like them in the neighborhood when I had young children because it's okay on the 4th, and then people would, go all weekend playing them. I sound like the get off my yard guy. I know that. But to me, if you've seen one fireworks show, Shanle, haven't you seen them all pretty much for the most part?
If you hate fireworks, yeah. But if you don't hate fireworks,
get it.
You need to go to Disney and see their fireworks. Maybe there's a lot of different fireworks shows, but I agree. At the end of the day, they go up, they explode, they make colors, and then you walk away, and it's a lot of money spent for entertainment.
I got a neighbor, Mike, across the street, and I think his fireworks are as good as Disney's. They look it's very similar to me in a lot of ways. Maybe Disney's a little fancier. Maybe they're better colors. Yeah, I just don't get the whole fireworks thing.
Well,
but anyway.
I'm going to take that back, Mike. No, they're not. Have you ever been in New Orleans on New Year's Eve?
Ooh, that's a good point.
I think I have, but I don't remember seeing any fireworks.
I remember my first year there, and the fireworks were going crazy. There were more fireworks on New Year's Eve in New Orleans than 4th of July, and I looked at my wife and I said, what the hell is going on? What is going on? And the sky was lit up. You looked out your window, and it was bright lights. And we actually invited family down to New Orleans on New Year's Eve because the fireworks shows were so great. So, no, fireworks are not overrated.
Okay. All right. We'll agree to disagree. All right. We'll agree on everything else pretty much. Joe Burrow, the Cowboys, Drew Brees, Teddy Bridgewater over Jameis Winston. But that was a fun podcast, guys. I appreciate it. Justin, we're going to put the overrated poll on our Twitter handle, which once again is
at Dundat Podcast.
I just like hearing you say it. Check us out on all the platforms. Please subscribe. We're on Podbean. We're on Stitcher. We're on iTunes. We're on Spotify. We're on Google. We'll be here throughout the offseason for you. We're going to bring you exclusive interviews and everything that's really hot in the world of the Saints and the NFL and even college football. We'll give it to you. But for my partners, Scott Shanle, our esteemed producer, Justin Thomas, I am merely Mike Nabors. Until next time, thanks so much for listening.